Welcome to Concept Craft. We are presenting step-by-step videos training to crack your certification exam, so you can gain the confidence to take on any accounting challenge. Now let's begin our today's lesson. $0 transactions. Learning outcomes. In this lesson, we'll cover creating $0 expenses in QuickBooks Online. Topics: how $0 transactions work, creating and using a $0 expense, creating a $0 expense with class tracking, other examples of using $0 transactions, using zero to be a hero. There are some things that clients can't adjust using a journal entry, such as billable expenses or when a business owner takes a draw instead of a paycheck. Clients need to record these transactions somehow, so what's the solution? How can QuickBooks Online help? With QuickBooks Online, clients can create $0 transactions. These are transactions where the total amount is zero. Clients can use $0 transactions for most transaction types, such as to create a sales receipt or an expense. How $0 transactions work. The principle of a $0 transaction is straightforward. The client creates a transaction in which the total of the positive lines and negative lines entered equals zero. They can do this for pretty much any transaction type, such as using $0 sales receipts to record daily sales. This is covered in the sales summaries lesson. To illustrate how $0 transactions work, let's look at one type, a $0 expense. In this transaction, the debit part of the entry is entered on the check for an account or item, as usual. The credit part of the entry, to offset the debit so the expense totals zero, is entered as a negative amount for an account or item. Because the payee is a vendor, there's nothing that needs to go into the customer field. The vendor name is in the payee field. If the client has class/job/location tracking turned on, they can also allocate the expense to a customer, job, class, or location. They do this in the allocation component of the entry, which is usually just the debit part. Now let's look at how to set up a $0 expense. Pro Advisor tip. Clients should consider setting up a bank type of account, which they can use as a clearing account to record these types of adjustments. That way, the $0 transactions don't appear in the register or reconciliation screen of their regular bank account, and they have a central place where they can find $0 transaction adjustments. Also, users who see $0 transactions in the regular bank account won't be tempted to delete them. Creating and using a $0 expense. $0 expenses are a good way for clients to allocate overhead expenses to classes or to allocate job costs, even if they're not billable, to jobs. They allow you to round up many previously entered expenses and mark the total as billable, rather than editing countless original expense entries. $0 expenses can also be allocated to a customer/subcustomer, a job/project, even a class or location. The example we'll use is a business owner who takes a draw but not a paycheck. The business uses QuickBooks Online Basic Time Tracking, and the owner has been set up as an employee, even though they don't get paychecks. This allows the owner to track their time to particular jobs. You or the client can mark this time as billable or not, depending on whether the customer will be invoiced for the owner's time. Select the headings to find out how to set up a $0 expense to record when the hour takes a draw. Create a cost of goods sold or expense type of account. Start by creating an account. We'll create a cost of goods sold account named Labor Owner's Allocation for this example. Create a service item in the Products and Services list. Create a service item as follows. Call the item Owner's Time. If your client is not going to invoice the customer for the time, uncheck the box for I sell this product/service to my customer. If they are invoicing for the time, keep this box checked and then enter the sales description. Enter a sales price for the amount your client wants to charge the customer if required. Select or set up the account where you or your client wants the income to post. Make sure to check the box I purchased this product/service from a vendor. Again, enter a description. Enter the cost. Use an amount equivalent to the hourly rate your client would pay an employee to do the work that the owner is doing. For the expense account, choose the Labor Owner's Allocation account we just set up. Select Save and Close. Now you or your client can start tracking the owner's time. Remember, if they are not invoicing for the time, they need to uncheck the box next to I sell this product/service to my customer in step 2 above. How do you use this data to create a $0 expense for when the owner takes a draw? Make sure to report on the time the owner spent on various jobs on a regular basis, once a week, twice a month, or whatever works for allocating the value of owner time to jobs. Let's say that the number of hours during the reporting period is 10, and the cost of those hours, as per our setup of the owner's time item, is $40 per hour. Now your client can use this data to create a $0 expense transaction as follows. Open an expense transaction and enter the owner's name in the payee field. 2. Use the item details grid to allocate the 10 hours at $40 per hour to the owner's time service item. Remember that this service item is mapped to the labor owner's allocation account. 3. Specify the customer/sub-customer to which the owner allocated their time. 4. Then use the category details grid, or the item details grid, to zero out the labor owner's allocation account by entering a negative number, and without specifying a customer. 5. Once it's confirmed that the total transaction amount is $0, select Save and Close. How does this transaction appear in the client's reports? The transaction journal behind the scenes shows a net of $0 to the labor owner's allocation account. The row debiting that account has a customer/sub-customer name, while the row crediting that account has no customer or sub-customer name. A one-day profit and loss indicates that the net effect on the labor owner's allocation account is 0. By displaying the one-day profit and loss with a column for each customer, clients can see the following. The $400 of the owner's time is allocated to the specified sub-customer. The minus $400 used to zero out that transaction is unallocated in the not specified column, creating a $0 expense with class tracking. Clients can also allocate a $0 transaction to a customer/job, or even a class or location. Let's create a $0 transaction for an example client, Craig's Landscaping, and use it to allocate job expenses to Craig's classes. Craig bought 58 bags of soil at $5 per bag in bulk before he knew which customers he would be using it for. He has since used 25 bags on jobs for residential customers and 33 bags for commercial customers. They need to allocate these job expenses to residential and commercial using a $0 expense. First, make sure that class tracking is turned on, then create 3 new classes. To do this, go to the gear icon and select All Lists, then Classes. Then create the new classes, residential, commercial, and to be allocated. Also create a 4th class called Overhead to use on transactions that are either commercial or residential. Now record the expense transaction for the 58 bags of soil to post to the to be allocated class. Later on, when it's understood where the bags of soil will be used, so to which classes they need to be allocated, create a $0 transaction as follows. Open the expense screen by selecting plus new and then choosing expense. Choose the clearing account as the payment account. There's no need to choose a payee because this transaction may reflect multiple purchases from different vendors that now need allocating. In item details, select soil as the item. Enter 25 bags at $5 per bag and enter residential as the class. On the next line, select soil as the item. Enter 33 bags at $5 per bag and choose commercial as the class. On the next line, select soil as the item. Enter minus 58 bags at $5 per bag and assign them to the to be allocated class. Next, select Save and Close. This creates a $0 expense that has no effect on the plants and soil account or on inventory if tracking inventory. When you or your client runs a profit and loss by class report, they will see the expense correctly allocated. Other examples of using $0 transactions. Let's look at some other situations when a client could use a $0 transaction. Select each heading to find out more. A straightforward way to track barter. What if your client owes money to a vendor, but the vendor is also a customer that owes the client money? In this case, the two amounts owed will appear on the unpaid bills report, for payables, and the open invoices report, for receivables. How can the client resolve this with a $0 transaction? In the example shown here, the customer, Esther's Bird Sanctuary, owes the client, Craig's Design and Landscaping, $2,739. However, Craig also owes Esther's Bird Sanctuary $2,000 as a vendor. Note that the Bird Sanctuary has been set up with slightly different names on the customers and vendors lists. So, Esther's Bird Sanctuary owes Craig a net of $739. Processing this one payment is much easier than making payments back and forth. Craig can handle this as an expense transaction from a clearing account or a special $0 balance barter account, and use it to net out A/R and A/P in QuickBooks Online as follows. As a result of this entry, both the A/R and A/P for Esther's Bird Sanctuary are reduced by $2,000. Here is the resulting balance of $739 in the A/R's Open Invoices report. And here is the resulting balance of $0 in the A/P's Unpaid Bills report. Allocating expenses to jobs/projects/classes. What if a client uses a third-party payroll service and needs to allocate payroll expenses to various customers, jobs, or projects after the fact? Let's say that a client's payroll expenses for last month were $15,000, and you need to allocate the payroll to 3 jobs. You should create a service item with only purchasing information linked to the expense account payroll expenses. Create a $0 expense using a clearing account. Allocate the $15,000 to the relevant jobs using product/service items. Devote the last row of the item details to zeroing out the expense by adding a negative $15,000 for payroll expenses and no job. You can also use this method to allocate classes and/or customers/subcustomers/projects. However, if expenses need to be allocated to locations, you'll need to use a journal entry instead of an expense account. Using a journal entry to allocate expenses to locations. Journal entries are the only transaction type that allows for one location per row. You can use one to record payroll expenses to locations as shown here. To find out more, read our article on creating and using journal entries. Recording business expenses paid personally by an owner who's not going to be reimbursed. When the owner of the company starts a new business, they might pay for certain expenses personally. These expenses need to be recorded in QuickBooks Online. If the owner isn't going to be reimbursed for these expenses, you or your client can use a $0 expense to record the transactions. Do this as follows. Enter the vendor name in the payee field. Enter the clearing account in the payment account field. Enter the payment date when the expense was incurred. Enter the expense account and the payment amount on the first line of the category details grid, or item details grid. Fill in the other columns as needed. Enter owner's contribution, an equity account, on the next line, and the amount spent as a negative number. You or your client can use this method anytime the owner pays for business expenses personally and won't be reimbursed. Summing up. Learning outcomes. In this lesson, we covered creating $0 expenses in QuickBooks Online. Knowledge recap. Now you can help your clients create $0 transactions to record transactions such as daily sales or billable expenses. You can also show your clients how they can allocate these transactions to a customer, job, class, or location. Next steps. This is the last lessons in this subject. Navigate back to the personalized training page to pick your next lesson.